A lot of it involves our sewage, here in the island, with a huge problem of we don't have enough sewage treatment. That can have lots of different issues associated with it. It doesn't help us with businesses that in some of the downtowns want to build more density. In Smithtown, where I live, that's an issue. It's also an environmental issue, where we have a lot of runoff or seeping into our groundwater, our waste, which is something we need to deal with. So I'm in support of those investments. I think some of that comes from the federal government, some of that happens on the state level, and some of that happens on the local level as well. But I think that's one area, hopefully, that immediately Democrats and Republicans can agree we got to do it together.
All right, Victor, you had a question.
Yeah. We're all businessmen here, and we all know that it's not the nominal tax rate for the corporations, it's the effective tax rate, which is a lot lower than the nominal. What are you going to do? And what are the Republicans going to do about the double taxation of dividends, which rewards borrowing, interest, paying money to a bank, deductible, and punishes equity, rewarding stockholders?
Well, what would you recommend? What would you recommend?
Get rid of the tax on dividends for the corporations. Let them deduct the amount of the dividends exactly the way they deduct the interest they pay to the soulless, stateless, multinational conglomerate financial institutions masquerading as banks. Simple, one stroke of a pen. You want to do something else in the tax rate system, lower the capital gains tax, increase the personal income tax so that wealthy people are encouraged to invest in business like they used to in the old days because they got the tax break on the capital appreciation. Eliminate the idea that a broker or a hedge fund manager is entitled to call his salary a capital gain. Let him pay his income tax like we do. We can't do that with our private businesses, no matter how creative our accountants are. They can because Congress lets them. The other thing you can do, you can restore the good old-fashioned penny a share trading tax that the Reagan administration eliminated in the 80s. What'll it do? It'll eliminate 100 million share transactions done by brain-dead computers. People will think the market will come back to people like us who have to worry about where are we going to invest our pension plan when the banks are giving us 0.1%. Where are we going to get any safety? Where's the safety net for us? The businessmen. And these are stroke of the pen congressional operations that don't cost anything, that don't gore anybody except the very, very powerful. I'm not calling them rich, I'm calling them powerful. The only reason dividends are double taxed is to encourage borrowing. From the days of Michael Milken and junk bonds down to today, interest is rewarded. You can deduct it. Dividends, which go back to stockholders, are punished. Not once, but twice. We pay it when we receive it, we pay a tax, and the corporation pays a tax. Why do dividends? Let's borrow money and pay salaries to management.
All right,
fix that.
I think we should let Randy address some of that.
That was a lot.
Didn't mean to say that.
Sure, but let me, I think you touched upon two things, and one in particular. The issue we have right now with the banks and where interest rates are a huge issue. Forget about business people, and it's obviously important for us. When you think about seniors in particular, who right now are living on fixed income. My mother's a perfect example. She's 75 years old. She's making no money on whatever savings she does have. And there is no place, in the past, you could invest even in municipal bonds or in T-bills, treasury bills, and get a good return and a safe return that you could feel good about. Those returns have been squeezed down so low that there's no place. And I think that's a very dangerous situation we're in, and there are a lot of reasons that are behind that. And also, the second thing to talk about, which is tax reform, and I think that's critical. I talk about in my plan that we need to do that. I don't have all the answers. I think that some of it is simple and some of it is very complicated. I think that we need to do is sit down again together as Republicans and as Democrats and bring in a lot of experts, because there's a lot of nuance, and it's a problem. But there's a lot of nuance in the tax code today, and simplify the whole thing. Make it much more straightforward. And changes that we can make, Victor, to your point, changes that we can make that encourage investment, I'm all for. And over leverage, which has been a problem that we've had in this country, and which we need, a lot of people think that's what happened with the housing crisis. We lowered our standards, or the amount of money, equity you need to put down, create a big bubble in the housing industry. We see a lot of credit issues that we've got in lots of other industries right now that could bite us in the behind. So we need to work to reduce that.
By the way, I just wanted to say, yesterday, or was it earlier this week, Knight lost about $400 million on these automatic trades, and it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And I was wondering if there's anything you could do to regulate that. Now, regulation is good. I know you don't like it because it's a key word, but there are things that we want to regulate so that we protect the populace. So I just wanted to put that out there. But Dan has a question.
Dan,
yeah, Randy.
And then Al.
My question may be a little easy, a little bit more philosophical.
Okay.
Okay. We study history for a reason, because it's important to learn from history, so we don't keep repeating the mistakes over and over.
But we do.
However, we do for a reason, very specifically because too many people are engaged in the business of revisionist history. It's not what happened, it's what their interpretation is of what happened.
Okay.
I'll give you an example.
Please.
Let's start with Ronald Reagan. He's everybody's hero. Ronald Reagan came in, he immediately cut taxes, very quickly ran up a multi-trillion-dollar deficit, and then after that, he raised taxes 7 times because he had to get it under control. That's bad, but that's not the way it's explained. Then you go into George Herbert Walker Bush, who I hold in very high regard. No new taxes. He knew he had to do it, so he did it. Cost him the election, but he did what was right for America. That paved the way for the Clinton years, and ultimately we ended up having a balanced budget. Then we, not through our fault, ended up fighting 2 wars. In the history of the country, we have never fought a single war without paying as you go. But Dick Cheney came up with the idea and says, deficit spending is a wonderful thing. You couple that with the recession and you got a mess. So, this revisionism of, I need to get elected, so I'm going to tell people what they want to hear, even if it's not the right thing, I have a problem.
By the way, I wrote a letter to H.W. Bush a couple of weeks ago.
I've been opposite.
And he returned the letter. It was very sweet. And he's a very nice man.
Postage due?
Huh?
Well, he saw us from Ernie, so.
So, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I'm not sure how to comment on that.
Or let it sit there.
Yeah.
Al?
Would you or have you signed the Grover Norquist tax pledge? And what do you feel about Glass-Steagall and trying to reimpose some of those controls?
Okay, so last election we did sign the Grover Norquist tax pledge. I will tell you, I think that I did sign it.
You did not?
I did sign it. I did sign it last in 2010. I did sign the Grover Norquist tax pledge. I did. In terms of Glass-Steagall and separation of the banks, and investment banks and different functions. I mean, clearly we have an issue here. I think we've overstepped in certain areas. I don't think everything in Dodd-Frank is good, but I think some parts of Dodd-Frank are good. When we look at derivative trading and making sure that that's transparent to people and creating exchanges, because that's a huge market that hadn't been regulated before. Things like that are important. But I'll be honest, Dodd-Frank to me is a little bit similar to the Affordable Care Act. There are some good things in the Affordable Care Act, okay? Who doesn't like the idea that insurance companies can't refuse you coverage because of any pre-existing conditions, or that up to 26-year-olds are covered. So some of the ideas there are good, and some of the things in Dodd-Frank are good as well, but the devil's in the detail. And I think, and these are similar bills that they're both gargantuan, they've got lots of things in it that people don't truly understand and that won't be helpful. And I think that we need to go through and really understand what are the goals here, and then let's, by the way, we may need to do it in steps. I mean, as a businessman, I can't overnight transform my business from one day to the next, because I need buy-in from my employees and from my customers, because we're going to make mistakes along the way, and we don't want to bet the farm right off the beginning. And I think there's a little element of, in Congress, when they finally do get to action, they put together these huge bills which are filled with special interest groups lobbying, and nobody really knows what they're getting, as opposed to very directly trying to attack and fix certain problems that we all agree that we have. And we're not going to agree on every problem, but there are certain ones that we will. Let's go for those first.
By the way, the man from Dayton, what's your name again?
Bob.
Bob, okay. I'm sorry, Bob, I forgot your name.
Quick question. You indicated a number of times how you feel it's going to be very important to come to work across party lines.
Yes, sir.
And that you're not there to listen to John Boner. As,
Dana. You said that, I didn't.
So based on that, are there any current major issues that have totally divided the Republican and the Democratic Party that you would right now be able to agree with, that you would differ from the Republican Party?
You know, I'll tell you a couple things, you know, and I had an interview with Newsday and asked me similar questions. You know, there was the highway transportation bill, which, you know, the Republicans and Democrats split on. The Republicans, in many instances, were on the wrong side of it, and members of the New York delegation of both sides of the aisle united together. That'd be one place where I wouldn't go with. And I came out publicly and said that I was not in step with what our leadership of our party talked about. You know, that's one example of it. I think when you look at trying to reduce the deficit, there was the Bowles-Simpson commission that was put together. There were a lot of things in the Bowles-Simpson commission that I did not like, okay, which I did not think were helpful. But at the end of the day, I'd rather make some progress than no progress. So that would be an example of something where I would have voted to pass the Bowles-Simpson. I mean, that there wasn't, you know, the president put that commission together and then ignored what the recommendations of that commission were, but I would have been in support of the findings of the Bowles-Simpson commission. Again, do I agree with some of the things in that? Absolutely not. But I also understand as a business person that any good deal is a deal where you get something and where you leave something on the table. And a deal where you get everything and the other guy doesn't get anything is not a sustainable deal. A, it's usually a deal you can't usually get, and B, when you do get it, it ends up going bad.
Then he beats you up in the alley.
Right.
Ray, you have a question?
No.
Oh,
Okay.
Mike and then Victor again.
I'm a little surprised based on what you said about the fact that the district is not necessarily Republican or Democrat. Right. And the fact of the matter is that when you were elected, obviously you'll be elected by the people. Why would you sign an agreement with this guy Norquist? I mean, who is he? You represent the people. You don't represent Norquist. Yep. And given the district, I would imagine that probably half of your constituents don't agree with that.
I think you're probably right. Well, or a substantial portion of it do. Look, I think fundamentally I don't agree in raising taxes. I think as a business person, when you're in a tough economic time, the last thing that you can do, so when we're in a recession and your business is hurting, the last thing that you can do is go to your customers
I understand
and raise prices. Because the fact is, if we're in a recession and you're having trouble, they're probably having trouble too. And in fact, at that point, you're doing whatever you can to keep a hold of what customers you do have, and you're often lowering your prices. And then you have to go in internally and try to figure out what you can do to basically rationalize your own cost structure in a way so you can be sustainable and you can survive this problem that you have. What I don't like about the government is that the knee-jerk reaction is always let's raise taxes. Because the problem with always raising taxes is you never actually attack the fundamental problem. Because it becomes sort of a mirage that you solved it, at the same time though, the problem still very much exists and lives there.
By the way, you know what, I want to follow up on Mike's question.
I haven't even answered it, but go ahead.
Why don't we let him?
Yeah, you want to finish your thoughts?
Well, if you want to answer, go ahead.
Well, here's my follow-up on Mike's question. I once wrote a piece about 10 or 15 years ago that when we are in good economic times, raise the taxes, bring down the deficit, and have that slack so when we go into a recession, we can spend beyond the receipts that we're getting in. So if you sign a thing that says that you can't raise taxes forever, we'll never be in that position where we can use the, what I call the momentum force.
Ernie, if we have to, and I was clear with this, the Bull Simpson move, the Bull Simpson did include some tax increases. If we have to make a compromise, and I don't like it, and I don't support it, but at the end of the day, if we're gonna have to make a compromise, I'm gonna compromise. Because we've gotta get something done.
Victor and then John.
And let me just be clear, I don't wanna sacrifice my core beliefs, and I don't think it's the right way to get done, but at the end of the day, we've gotta move the ball forward, and we're gonna have to work together. And we have to work in a cooperative manner, so it is.
So, you know, I think signing that agreement sometimes puts you in a position where you can't compromise.
Look, at the end of the day, the only thing that's gonna matter when I get to Washington, D.C., I have with my bosses. And my bosses are the members, you know, the constituents of the first congressional district, and the American people. At the end of the day, that's what's gonna govern the way I vote. And I think, you know, that's that.
You,
Victor and then
Randy,
John.
Okay, Victor,
you
go ahead.
identified the key problem, that these omnibus bills, packages of special interest legislation, are thrown at a congressman who can't possibly read it.
Who could?
Their staff can't. All right, will you, the moment you get into Congress, tell your leadership that no more omnibus packages? I want to know what I'm voting on, one issue at a time. Break these things out so we all know where we stand and where our constituents stand.
100%. I think I put in my plan, I honestly, I apologize, I can't remember, that the bill should be limited to a certain size, a length, because that way it is readable. Because I do think, and you have to read, you know, a lot of people talk about this last election, I'm going to read before I sign it. But let's be honest, I mean, there's so many bills going through the Congress, there's so many votes that are happening, a lot of them aren't, most of them aren't getting passed, but a lot of votes are happening, nobody could possibly read all that stuff. So yeah, I'm actually supportive of, I would make it, I think the way you really get done is to limit the size of the bill, because you can't stuff that much into 100 pages, and I make it, I mean, I can't read something, you know, I can, but I think
how about the size of a Wrigley ad?
I'd just like to point out that if you're supporting that, there's an organization called downsizedc.org, and by filling out a form you can support the One Subject at a Time Act and the Read the Bills Act, which would require the bills to be read.
There's one more hard part to that.
Okay.
If you're in favor of no more taxes, which I think most of us around here are, Norquist notwithstanding, what are you going to do when you get down there on the big, unfunded giveaway, for instance, like prescription coverage for the elderly? Are you going to stand up now and say, there are no funds that cover that? Nobody contributes to that plan except the rest of the national taxpayers out of the general fund. Should we eliminate that plan or make it pay as you go like Social Security does?
You're talking about Part D of Medicare?
I'm talking about the prescription drug coverage, yeah?
I support the prescription drug coverage. I mean, I think you...
But who's going to pay for it?
Well, we need to figure out a way to pay for it.
Okay.
Hey, I'd be lying. Nobody can stand up here today and tell you the answer in 1 minute or even 20 minutes to how they're going to fix and ensure the longevity and the strength of Medicare. They're not going to do it. It's a complicated thing. Am I devoted? Do we need to fix it? And am I willing to sit down and have that conversation and commit myself together with the other side, with the Democrats, to get that done? Absolutely. But I don't want to fool anybody, just say, just do this, that. That's not going to solve the problem.
John, and Ken.
You know, a growing economy produces a lot of fresh income.
Yes.
But my point is this: the only way that the Victor's things were pretty much, these are all tax reforms. Carried interest, this high-speed trading, double taxing dividends, this is all tax stuff. The only way you can do that is protected with this Grover-Norquist promise that when you're done, that you're not going to raise taxes. You've got to fix it all with the promise of not raising taxes, or else no one's going to support what you have to do. We'll sit here at 2% growth. China will eat our lunch over 10 years. And you have to reform all this crap, and you have to do it with a promise of no new taxes, no higher taxes.
Look, I don't think we should raise taxes. I've been very clear about that. I think
But these are raising taxes all over the place, but you have to have a net, no new taxes. That has to be the promise, or else no one's gonna trust you to reform this.
I agree. We should not, the net, whatever we want to call it, we should not be raising taxes in a time of, I don't believe in higher taxes anyway, because we've already got an overgrown federal bureaucracy and bureaucracy at many levels that needs to be brought down to a level that is commensurate with what its responsibilities are and are commensurate with what we could achieve in the private sector. You know, the government's the only area I know where every year doing the same repetitive task gets more expensive. In my business, my customers every year look for us to do things cheaper because they assume I'm going to apply technology, because they assume I've got process improvements, so it'll get less expensive. So absolutely, should we be not raising taxes?